and welcome to episode 40 of the Actual Astronomy podcast. This will be observations and the sky, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my beginner astronomy class and some objects to observe in this coming week. And how has your week been, Shane?
It's been pretty good. I was able to observe a couple nights,
Awesome.
and I came across yet another deal that I just couldn't pass up.
You are a bad, and we're not gonna publicize my, I guess, me chastising you for putting me onto some of these auction sites, but my wife is very upset with you right now. But we'll just leave it at that.
That's fair. I'll bring a bottle of wine next time to pacify.
Yeah, so you've actually, and you sent me something very brief on this, and I'm extremely excited because you bought one thing that I've always wanted to get, but I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, so actually, there's maybe two separate things that I'll talk about. The first one is what you just spoke of, and I was a successful winning bidder on a auction for a 35 millimeter Meisuyama eyepiece. So
Wow.
yeah, they're not made anymore. They're fairly desirable or collectible, I suppose. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one, and I've said this myself incorrectly on previous podcast episodes. And I've said that the 24 millimeter panoptic is the widest field of view that you can get in an 1.25" eyepiece.
It is, because you can actually get it.
That's true. Yeah, because you can actually buy one today if you want one.
Yeah. If you want to get that one, yeah. But this one.
However, if you want the widest possible field of view in an 1.25" eyepiece, it's not the panoptic.
No,
it's the 35 millimeter Meisuyama. Now there's a few clones out there.
Pseudo Meisuyamas, they call them.
Yes.
I think.
Yes, like there's a Beta, I think, like Utascopic or something like that.
Yeah, and then there's a Parkes Optical, and there's a old Celestron Ultima, and there's also the Orion Ultrascopic.
Right.
And there may have been an Antares branded one as well.
The Antares Elite Plossels.
There you go. Yeah. I'm not sure if they did a 35.
Though. I don't think so. I think they topped out at 25. But I could be wrong on that.
And it has amazing reviews too. It has excellent eye relief, and it's sort of a strange looking eyepiece.
Very strange. Yeah, it's not like anything else. It's kind of tall and narrow, but it's not like a straight cylinder. It's got some angles to it. It's got 52 millimeter field of view, or 52 degree field of view.
Yeah,
which in my
35 millimeter. Is
it's which enables the wide field of view. So in my 76 millimeter DCU refractor, the panoptic, so this is at its native focal length of 570 millimeters. The panoptic gives me about 2.8 degree field.
Mm-hmm.
The Meisuyama will give me something like 3.2 or 3.3. Like I'm almost getting another 2/3 of a degree out of that eyepiece. And like you said, the reviews talk about how like clear and contrasty and colors and like everything about it just sounds like a magical eyepiece. So I'm kind of excited for it to arrive.
Yeah. Was this on that auction site you turned me on to?
Yeah. It's an addiction.
It really is. It really is. And I mean, we don't mention it because I don't know if we can. It's like what is it like? It's like arbitrage or something like that. Like it's an intermediary of some sort. So I'm not really sure the legalities and everything of it. And even when I, just to kind of carry forward on that, that's not just us. I was talking to an individual this week on that telescope that I've long sought. And even that individual did the same thing when I was chatting to him. He just referred to it as essentially that auction site with an identifying character. And so I was like, so I'm not sure what the story is on that. So I just I'm always a little bit, I always kind of back away from that one because we wouldn't want to get banned now, would we?
No, let's try not to.
So that's exciting. Wow.
Yeah.
So any idea how long it will take to get that?
Well, I'm hoping this week or next week I should have it in my possession. So I'll shoot you a text the day it comes.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know how it is. And
yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah, because I think there's other eyepieces I will buy before that one. But that I just honestly I just always wanted to get it. I just wanted to look through it. Like
Mhm.
so now you have it, and that's great. I'm gradually collecting your eyepieces anyway, so
Yeah,
this
exactly.
will go well with the rest of
So the second deal, um, so maybe I'll even give a little bit of a backstory here. So a couple months ago, I had the good luck of acquiring a 5 millimeter and a 4 millimeter TMB super monocentric
Oh yeah,
eyepieces.
yeah
Yeah,
yeah.
and I've been blown away by them. They're phenomenal. They're anything good you read about them, I can support. They're fantastic. So it made me want to acquire some of the other focal lengths. It's a fairly large set. It goes from 4 millimeter up to 12 with 1 millimeter increments. And then from there, there's a 14, 16. And then there's some really, really rare ones. There's an
Isn't there like an
18,
18? Yeah,
18 and a 21.
I've heard like some pretty good stuff about the 18, but it's one of those things where sometimes I wonder if just because things are rare, are they better?
Hard
And
to say. Yeah.
sometimes it's true. Yeah, sometimes it's true.
There's only 50 of the 18 millimeters made and 50 of the 21 millimeters made.
Oh wow.
And on our unnamed auction site, recently an 18 millimeter was sold off, and it went for around $1,000 Canadian.
Wow.
Yeah, and I just don't know. I don't know if it's worth it for me to spend that kind of money
Yeah.
on an 18 millimeter eyepiece. Like I have an 18 millimeter Pentax SMC ortho, which is fantastic, and I don't think I could spring for the TMV. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress. I put a want ad out on the Canadian Used Astronomy site, just saying, hey, if there's anybody that has TMB super monos that they want to sell, please reach out to me. And I posted that probably a month ago. Nothing came my way. I honestly wasn't expecting anything to come my way, just because those eyepieces are so rare and so desirable that nobody really wants to sell them.
Yeah.
And if they do, they probably have an astronomy buddy that's already spoken for them, so
Yeah.
they never hit the used websites.
Yeah.
So anyway, last week I think it was, out of the blue, I get an email from an individual in Canada asking if I'm still looking for some of these eyepieces, and indicated that he had bino sets of the 10 millimeter, the 8 millimeter, 6 millimeter, and he also had the exceptionally rare TMB Barlow, 1.8 times Barlow.
Oh wow.
And
Did you get the Barlow?
of course,
Yeah. I think
which
that's the one to get. Yeah.
that's, yeah, if you read about it, it's probably, I think a lot of people consider it the best Barlow ever made.
So
Um,
what is a Barlow exactly for for those that aren't so steeped in the geekdom of amateur astronomy yet?
Right. It's basically like a magnification multiplier. So a Barlow, you'll insert it in between the eyepiece and the telescope. So either your diagonal, or if you're running a Dobsonian, just right into the focuser. And then you'll put whatever eyepiece you want into the Barlow, and it just doubles the power. So an 18 millimeter eyepiece put into a 2 times Barlow, that eyepiece will now behave like a 9 millimeter eyepiece. And then on top of that, you also typically double the eye relief that eyepiece has. So it's an effective way to double the amount of eyepieces in your collection. If you had a 30 millimeter and a 20 millimeter and a 15 millimeter eyepiece, adding a 2 times Barlow, you're now basically adding like a 15 millimeter, a 10 and a 7.5 millimeter eyepiece to your collection.
Hmm.
So a lot of people use Barlows to round off kind of holes without having to buy a whole bunch of extra eyepieces. Is
Yeah.
that a fair description?
Yeah, that's pretty good. And generally, and you and I have mentioned this before. Generally, we're not fans of Barlows, um, but there are a few exceptions. That would be one of the exceptions, I believe, because I think if it was me, that one has such a excellent reputation as perhaps the best Barlow that you could probably find an eyepiece that dialed in like an optimal power and then just let it live in that Barlow. would be
Yeah.
probably what
Yeah.
I would do, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's a two-element Barlow, which is interesting. I think most Barlows are 3 to 4 elements.
Yeah.
Um,
With
and
some
people say,
Vaseline with some Vaseline in between them.
yeah, and a lot of people say online that like the glass is invisible, like with the coatings. If you're just looking at it, you have to
Mhm.
get the light just right to even see the glass,
Just
which
put a fingerprint on it.
yeah, yeah, then you'll see it every time. So anyway, I had an outstanding dialogue with the person that sold me all of this stuff. He's an older gentleman that has had many years in the hobby of astronomy, but is starting to get to the point where some of his gear isn't getting used as much, so he's thinking about selling it. So I bought, one. I didn't go for the bino viewing pairs because I don't have a bino viewer, but so the Barlow, the 10 millimeter, the 8, and the 6 should arrive Tuesday or Wednesday
The
this week.
8?
Yeah.
I was hoping you would say that because I'm actually running in the calculator some math right now. So just give me, because your focal length on the tack is 570, right?
Yeah.
Because
Well, you're
that's going to really give you the 8 millimeter, and that Barlow is going to be a match made in heaven, literally. I mean, that is going to be the most deadly combination.
at
Because
4.4.
yeah, 4.4, because that's going to give you 128 power, and in my opinion, somewhere between 120 and 130 power on that TAC 76 is your optimal. Like that's going to give you absolutely the best view on the vast majority of nights. And that 8 millimeter in that Barlow is because will that extend the eye relief just a hair with it? It probably will, just a
It
little
should,
bit.
yeah. It
Yeah.
should it should close to double the eye relief, I think.
So
Well, or 1.8 times it, I think, is usually how that goes.
yeah, I mean that's really gonna give you a extremely perfect, I think, power on the 76, and it's gonna make that eyepiece. Yeah, that's really gonna be something else, Shane. That is just
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
I can't wait for it. And maybe one note too, just about that Barlow. The fact that it's a 1.8 times Barlow is just genius to me.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's
you know,
that's the way to go.
yeah, because a 2 times Barlow is very common, but a
Yeah,
2 times Barlow ends up replicating a
too
lot of the
many.
focal lengths,
Yeah.
whereas a 1.8 gets you in between just about every focal length. So it's perfect. It's ideal.
Yeah, I have a 1.6, and
Oh,
I've used, and it's just absolutely the most inexpensive one. And that's the Barlow I use the most because, just like you said, that is a really good power. And also, it's a 2 inch. And for whatever reason, I've really enjoyed having a 2 inch Barlow. I just find it's a little bit easier to use, sits in the diagonal a little bit better, like it feels a little bit more seated or something. Um, and then it was really inexpensive. I have an Antares one. It's pretty old now, and they still make it. And it's made by Glenn Spears, who's really well known, reputable um, maker of astronomical goods over in Western Canada, and Vancouver, I think is where he is, or Vancouver Island. And yeah, but I think 1.8 might just be maybe a little bit better. But yeah, my two times Barlow, I just don't. I should just sell it. Like I've hardly ever used it. I used it once this year, and you know, yeah. Like if you're just getting into astronomy, I think a two times Barlow can be useful. But once you get enough eyepieces, like you said, they just duplicate them.
yeah, exactly. An interesting thing, though, in my dialogue with this gentleman, we talked. We had a 45-minute FaceTime session,
Geez, should
and
have had him do a podcast.
probably, yeah, probably. um, and we had multiple email exchanges that were
Yeah.
very long-winded. He was telling me of an interesting observing technique, and I'll walk you through it here. And I'm curious if you've ever heard of this before.
This sounds like how to catch big fish.
Kind of. So, what he said he likes to do, and he did this in the 2003 Mars opposition, and pretty much any time he was trying to do critical planetary observing.
Okay.
First of all, what he said was he would dedicate 3 to 4 hours to the session. He
Okay.
would just resign himself to the fact that he's going to be at the telescope for a long time.
Yeah.
What he would do is start off and spend the first hour or two with exceptionally high magnifications, whether or not the seeing would support it. Um, and the seeing typically would get better, as the evening air cooled and, all of the surrounding things stopped radiating heat. And he said, then when the seeing would steady, he'd back off the magnification a little bit, and his eye was now able to see far more detail. And he
Okay.
said when he would do this, even if he was naked eye observing the moon, after having observed at high power for an hour or two through the telescope, he said even the naked eye moon looked completely different to him,
Okay.
because the eye gets engaged in a different way and starts to perceive detail and light more acutely. And I thought, wow, I've never heard of this before. And I'm curious if you have.
So I have not, but just I do a little bit of background on human perception, and that makes sense. And although I had never heard of that before, strangely enough, the way that I will observe planets, I mean, I guess I've just never elucidated it or passed it along. But for example, last night, what I was doing, and now I wasn't. I guess I was out for a good piece of time. I'm not sure if my length of time matches what he was saying. But certainly, the more and longer you observe, the more you will see. So there definitely is a lot to that. But yeah, I ran about 125 power, and what I would do is I the past several sessions is I would observe at 125 for a bit, um, like not that long, maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and then drop down to 85 power and then do my sketches. And then
Interesting.
and then the same with the 100 millimeter in the past few sessions. I would do 150 and then down to 105. Um, yeah, yeah, that holds water to me. That seems to make sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'm going
yeah,
to give it a try. And one thing, though, that definitely I think is, I think every planetary observer would agree, is you do have to spend time at the eyepiece just
time at
looking
the
at the planet.
eyepiece.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's critical. You can't just take a look at Jupiter for 5 minutes or
No,
so. You really need to spend some time there, because the seeing comes and goes, but
yeah,
your eye also gets used to being like to start teasing out the finer detail and
yeah,
noticing some of the nuances.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, right off the top, if although he's put a little bit more thought and context into it, but two of the main takeaways from that are, it like I don't feel like it's that much of a secret to step back and say, hey, if you really want to see stuff on a planet like Mars, what you do is you set up and you do like a 3-hour session at high power and you wait for moments of still seeing. I'd say, yep, like that's how you do it, like pretty much. What he adds about going from higher power to lower power, yeah, I mean, I think that probably does hold some water as well, because if you're kind of waiting for those still moments and you're very focused at the eyepiece and maybe taking some breaks and going back and forth, I don't think you do sit there with your eye glued to the eyepiece for that period of time, but maybe he does. Yeah, I think that would probably work, because then once you drop down, the seeing is going to look like it's improved remarkably,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
and you're not going to be having to wait as long. That's what I noticed as well. So
Yeah. Well, and
yeah,
after having had this conversation with him, I thought back upon many of my observing sessions, and I do the opposite, right? I start with a very low power, and then work my way up as much as the seeing allows, and then I usually just sit at that focal length or that power. But then when I spend some time, at a higher power, usually later on in the night, for whatever reason, I'll put a lower power eyepiece in, probably because I'm finding other objects. But if I go back to, say, Jupiter, um, it does seem like the lower power eyepiece is just showing me a little bit more, and I don't know if that's because of just getting my eye sort of adapted or accustomed to planetary observing for the session, or what,
Hmm.
or maybe it's just, wishful thinking too. But
Well, I've also, and I read this recently. I wish I could kind of dig it up. I think it was Bill Palamoni, or I'm probably saying his last name wrong, from Cloudy Nights, but he had written something, or somebody in a thread with him, and they were discussing kind of like these optimal powers of sort of being around that roughly 1 to 0.8 millimeter exit pupil kind of thing, which, in my 100 millimeter, it would be right around that 100 to 120 power range. Um, yeah, so I mean, it does seem like other people have mentioned this as well. They didn't mention that process of starting high and then dropping low, but there's a lot of different techniques, and certainly that is something definitely to try. And often what I'll do is I'll just start, and as the telescope cools, you like to give it at least 15 or 20 minutes for these little refractors, even, which should be cooling almost right away. But I'll give them that long, and then I'll kind of run up as high as I can go with them, sort of that 2 times per millimeter of aperture, and then kind of dial it back. Over the course of 20 or so minutes, like I said. So yeah, I mean, you know, that's a really good conversation on that, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it almost opens up another topic of approaches to planetary observing, because, like you said, there's definitely a few different ways you can do it. This
Mm.
is one of them. We shared our ways, and then I think in a email exchange, um, I shared a comment in a Cloudy Nights thread about straight through viewing in a refractor, which is not common today, but was common hundreds of years ago. So,
I hear the Masseyama only works straight through.
oh, okay, perfect.
Just kidding.
All right. So I think you and I both did some observing this week too.
Yeah, well, actually, I had kind of made up two sets of show notes because I actually hadn't done any observing until last night. So you and I are both off for a few days, coincidentally enough, during the new moon period, and
Nice.
sort of ramping up to that. I was maybe doing a little bit of work in the evening, just like 15 minutes here and an hour there, kind of thing, and I was on call and that kind of stuff. So I didn't really get that much astronomy in until last night. I'm also teaching my August astronomy 4-week class, which I'm now halfway through at our local university outreach center, and just prepping for that, which I put a fair bit of time into, and I enjoy doing, and it's been really great to have so many students. We're up. I think there's 22 or 23 students in the class, and
Wow.
I was shocked this week at how many people actually went out and observed. Like, I've been teaching this class now more or less, like in one form or another, but pretty consistently 3 times a year, and sort of one in each of the main seasons. And typically, I go in and I kind of give people the rigmarole. And a lot of people typically, and all these classes up to this point have been in person. And I find that probably half or maybe more are more individuals interested maybe in the astrophysics, is kind of the way to put it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, Shane, I'm not an astrophysicist, and I don't know my tangent from a cosine. Boy, yeah, I'm not, like, I say that I'm math challenged, but my wife says that I am not math challenged. I'm probably decent at math. I'm actually probably average is what it comes down to. I know some people are really good. Some people it's a blank wall. I'm probably average at math, and I should not be teaching it at all to anybody whatsoever. But with the COVID-19 restrictions and the move to Zoom, what's happened is, and what had happened in my in-person classes, is they had gone from like 40 or 50 people and me teaching a more generalized curriculum on astronomy, with maybe like from a quarter to a third to a half, gradually increasing over time to pretty much the whole session being about visual astronomy, which is what I know and what I enjoy talking about, and a move away from like black holes and astrophysics stuff, which I really don't know anything about, and was really taking up way too much time and energy for me to learn and then build a story around in order to give an entertaining class. And I just really didn't know it as well either. So the classes, the numbers in the classes had decreased, but the interest level in the individuals who are attending had gone way up, so that I was getting maybe 8 to 12 people, and lots of those individuals were going out. Probably half or so were going out and doing astronomy or whatever. But this time it seemed like, wow, like out of the 22 or 23 people, I think like 17 or 18 of them had gone out and actually done some astronomy.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
so bigger class and higher numbers of people doing it. And if they hadn't, and it doesn't necessarily work for everybody every week, they had gone and like bought Terrence Dickinson's Night Watch, which is our recommended beginner guide to the nighttime sky, and I think serves anybody pretty well. Though it's North American focused, or maybe Northern Hemispheric focused, is a great beginner's guide. And a few other people had gone and bought binoculars or dug their binoculars out, and one person gave us really an incredible description of what they had seen on craters in the moon and stuff like that. So that was really, really cool, really cool. So I've got 2 more sessions left, and then a month off, and then I'll do an 8-week session. But I'm almost thinking I might want to just make these. Typically, I do 3 times a year: fall, winter, spring. And I'm thinking I may want to take them to 4 or 5 weeks a year and actually do the proper seasons. And I
Yeah, yeah.
think, yeah, because I was, when they came to me and said what they wanted me to test something, and then the testing isn't happening, I think, because we got so many people in the class, which is great.
Hmm. Hmm.
But they were thinking that, and I'm fairly tech savvy, and I do work at the university as well on technical research. And so I think they were thinking, well, we'll get Chris to test it out, right? And blah, blah, blah. And then, well, we can't really subject, 24 people to some testing. So we aren't doing the testing, but it's been great to have so many attendees. But yeah, I like the option of having just 4 weeks. And I was surprised how many people wanted to come and do online sessions in August. I think it's almost like a perfect month with the Perseids and planets and still warm weather. So I'm almost thinking I might do like an August session, like an October session or something like that. While it's still warm enough for people to go out. Then maybe like a February session, and then maybe like a May session, and I'd like just do four by fours.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think a barrier for some people is just the time it takes to, put on a jacket, get in your vehicle, and drive to the location for one of these types of events,
Yeah,
because there's 20 minutes and then you have the same amount of time on the back end when you go home.
yeah.
Whereas if you could sit on the couch and, start the dishwasher and maybe even sip on a beer, that's a pretty nice way to spend an evening.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And boy, like one of the main reasons why I do this is, and you and I have been involved, and you come and help me out in the classes on a frequent occasion. Maybe I ask too frequently, but you do have some different expertise than I do, for sure.
Yeah, I enjoy
Um,
it.
yeah, and it's a lot of fun. And one of the main reasons why I like doing these, and you and I have done tons of outreach in the past together and separately for astronomy clubs and on our own and all kinds of stuff. Um, but one of the challenges with learning the nighttime skies, in my opinion anyway, is you go to like an astronomy club session, and then kind of like that's it, you know, and you kind of never hear or see from them for another long period of time. And it becomes really challenging to actually learn the night sky when that's the case. So maybe there's like a presentation that you go to, and then you go out and you're trying to see stuff, but by the time another presentation or meeting or whatever comes around, it's a month or more, or maybe several months later. By the time your schedule lines up, you're just out of luck figuring out if what you saw was what you thought it was, or asking that question. It becomes pretty disjointed, over the long period. But for example, when I do these on a weekly basis, at least even for a short period of time, people come back the next week, and boy, I bet you like 25 or so percent of the people have a question they are just really eager to get answered. Like, what was that bright star? was that bright star a planet, or what am I seeing? I noticed this. And so you can rapidly develop people's observational skills of the nighttime sky, and then they really feel like they're like what they're seeing is what they're seeing. Like you really build in the knowledge, because it's often the question. I always feel a little bit bad. I do get the odd person who's joined the class in the past. None of these individuals appear to be like this, but after my first session, somebody will sort of sit back and start to say, "But how do you know that's what it is?" kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you kind of have to trust me, because I've got almost 25 years experience doing this, and the science that globally is probably spent many hundreds of billions of dollars on, it's not a conspiracy. So
Yes.
you kind of get that sense that maybe they're like, well, maybe it's just what do they used to say? It was like lamps in the sky or fires in the sky. It was
Yeah. Yeah.
the old adage for and perhaps even incorrectly for the some of the early perhaps peoples around the world. But there's just sort of a lot of mythology in and around that. We're, I think, trying to gradually move away from the actual mythology to enjoying it as mythology alone.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's been really refreshing to go through with all these folks and to see lots of engagement there. But like you said, I also did get out and do some observing. I actually got a sketch. Just didn't have time. I'll do a photo of it once we get done here this morning and send it to you. But I did a sketch of Mars, and I did a sketch of Venus, and yeah, it was sort of, in a way, kind of unremarkable, in a way quite remarkable. Like I don't think there's anything too spectacular about Mars right now, though it is getting bigger. Like I feel like I'm noticing almost as much detail through the 60 millimeter as I was like even just a week or 10 days ago through the 100 millimeter. It is really starting to get big. Did you stay up and observe it last night? Because it's now getting up there after midnight.
No, I didn't. I went to bed a little early last night. It was
Yeah.
a long day and did some housework and
Yep.
just no energy for observing last night.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But with the time off that we have this week, it I stayed up. I didn't intend to stay up till midnight. I'll explain that in a minute. But I stayed up till midnight observing, and I mostly observed, sort of like 50% observing, 50% messing around with the new mount. But by the time I was going to bed at midnight, Mars was actually just about high enough to begin observing. And then I decided that what I would do, rightly or wrongly, I was on the fence. I was thinking, well, I could stay up and observe it, but the sky didn't seem to be. The sky was pretty stable, but it was still a little bit low. Maybe it was 15 degrees up ish, and I knew it was going to be almost overhead at about 4 a.m. or whatever. So I decided I'll just get up again. So I get up at 4 and did an hour.
Oh wow!
So
Okay.
if I'm a little bit tired and rambly, this is this is why. This is why, because we're actually going out and staying up all night sometimes and then doing the podcast. So yeah, and it was well worth it. And I knew that Venus would be coming up, and it was neat because in the early evening, just after it got dark, I did a session on. I looked at Jupiter, not as long as I would have liked, and then I looked at Saturn for quite a long period of time. And then I knew that, I saw Mars rising, and I knew it would. And then I knew that Venus would be up pretty high in the morning sky too. And I think it's just at or just past greatest western elongation here. So it's going to be really nice and high. And then the moon was nearby. It was just incredibly beautiful this morning, and the conditions were pretty excellent. So that was nice. And like I said, I did a couple sketches, but nothing really struck me at first. And then, it's one of those things. This is where sketching really comes into play, as you know, Shane. Have you tried sketching the planets much yet?
Never, not yet. No.
Was that this is the part in the phase, and I forget what it's called. I think it's part of that Schroeder effect or Seelinger effect or whatever it is, where the terminator, and this is the area of any planet really, but most noticeable on the moon and Venus, where the light and the dark areas match or meet up. And Venus is close to being half illuminated right now. Okay.
Okay.
And and what I noticed was, and this is really a strange thing to describe, is the crescent starts, and then sort of on the opposite end. So if we're looking to the top part of my telescope, south is up, and then on the northern part, it also begins or ends. But then it's like a vertical line connecting those two little straight arcs, and it's the strangest looking thing. So I did a pretty good sketch of that, but until I did the sketch, like I was looking at it and looking at it, I was like, what is, like, it was really hard to get my eye on it today for some reason. And the conditions were good. My eye was a little bleary, but I was kind of like rubbing the sleep out of it quite literally. But kind of once I got my eye and the scope working with some good power, I was like, it's that weird straight line effect where there's like a point in in when Venus is angled a certain way to the Earth and the Sun, where it's very difficult to determine that half illuminated point, and you'll almost never see Venus as half illuminated to the eye anyway. You'll always see kind of these little cusps or little parts of the crescent on the north and the south, or one or the other, and then
Mhm.
you'll see them just connected with a straight line, which is a very weird observation. So anyway, and then I saw some dark shading in the middle and that. And I actually did a fairly decent sketch of Venus. Sketch of Mars, not as good, and it is like only a 60 millimeter scope, but I felt I could see the polar cap a little easier and some of the darker features towards the north. And I almost thought I could see maybe the northern polar cap this morning. I didn't draw it. I was really unsure about it, but anyway, so I had some good views. Did you take a look at Jupiter or Saturn?
Yeah, yeah. I was out Monday night, so August 10th and August the 11th. Mostly Jupiter. I did take a quick look at Saturn, but when I'm observing on a work night, Saturn is still a little bit low, before my bedtime,
Yeah.
and it's the seeing just isn't great for Saturn at that point. So I've
Mm,
entirely been focused on Jupiter. So Monday night was the first time I also used that Sky T mount, and it's fantastic. It is so good, so smooth. The slow motion controls are fantastic. It really worked well.
nice.
Um, I did try to look at Antares. Uh, did we talk about this? I feel like you and I have had a conversation about this, but maybe not.
About the companion?
Yeah, looking at it.
Yeah, because this was in the deep dive we did.
Right, right. So anyway, I tried to see if I could get the companion, and it just wasn't possible. Um, I think I got a little bit of the green occasionally as it was flaring like crazy because it's so low in the sky here where we live.
Yeah,
But anyway, it was kind of a standard night of observing, nothing too spectacular. Tuesday night, though, I used my Teleview Genesis on the Sky T mount. So
okay.
the Genesis is a pretty heavy telescope. All said and done, it's probably 10 or 12 pounds. And then that might even be before the diagonal and eyepiece.
Yeah.
But rock solid on that Sky T mount. And I've used a lot of alt as mounts in my days of astronomy. If you name it, there's a good chance I've used it, except for some of the higher end ones like the DMs, like the disc mounts and the half hitches. But um, this is the best alt as mount I've ever used.
Mm.
In terms of sturdiness, smoothness, it's fantastic. Um, so that night, looking at Jupiter, I think it was that night, or was it the Monday? Hmm. The four Galilean moons were equally spread out on the left and the right. So there was two on the left, two on the right. They were all equally spaced. But what was interesting was the two that were closer to Jupiter, like, were kind of higher up, like they weren't on the same plane
Hmm.
as the other Galilean moons. and it sort of gave it like a three-dimensional look. Like those two moons were on the backside,
Oh wow.
of Jupiter. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the case or not. That's the only real explanation I would
Yeah,
have, or
that
maybe they
sounds about
were
right.
on the front side. I
Yeah.
don't know, but it was quite pretty actually.
Cool.
And I think I'm just taking a look through my notes. I think the Great Red Spot was out that night.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So that was an interesting observation. And then I was messing around. So I have a 24 millimeter panoptic, and I think you probably remember a long time ago I used to have the Vixen LVWs in my
Hmm.
collection. I've gotten rid of all of them, but I still have a 22 millimeter Vixen LVW. And I thought, I don't need that and the panoptic, so I should really decide which one I want to keep. So that night I was going back and forth between the Panoptic and the LVW up in Cygnus.
Yeah, because one
Um,
gives you like, I think the Panoptic gives you just under 24 power, and then the 22 millimeter give you just under 26 power in your tack. So it's pretty
yeah,
hair splitting. I don't know that you could see two power difference. Maybe you can. I don't think I.
no, no. The thing though that I read and confirmed was that the LVW just seems to be like it just has a little bit less light throughput.
Yeah.
It just seems a little darker. And I'll be selling it. It's a fantastic eyepiece, and for somebody who wears glasses, it's one of the most comfortable eyepieces that you can observe with.
Yeah.
And it also has that benefit of, it's an 1.25 inch eyepiece, but it also has like a 2 inch barrel on it, so you can put it into a 2 inch diagonal quite
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
But what was funny was, so I'm panning around in Cygnus, right around Saturn, the kind of the middle star of the cross, and stumbled across an open cluster. I had no idea what it was, but it was apparent that I was looking at an open cluster. And
Isn't like M29 there or something?
yeah, it's up there, right in that area. So what it turned out to be was NGC 6910. And there's like 4 or 5 really somewhat faint stars, which provided a good test for these two eyepieces. But what was funny about this was, so again, I didn't know which cluster I was looking at because I didn't have any star charts out with me. I just wanted to pan an area that was rich with stars, and Cygnus runs, right through the Milky Way, and that's a great place to see a lot of stars.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. 6910. Okay, I get you.
Yeah, but when I came inside to identify what cluster I was looking at, I fired up my planetarium software, and I was looking to the right of Saturn because that's where it appeared optically to me. And I'm looking, and there's no open clusters that appeared,
Oh
and
yeah.
that looked like what I saw.
Yeah.
And then it took me probably 5 or 10 minutes, and
It's
this is being
reversed. Yeah.
a little bit tired, that
Yeah.
the view in a refractor is left, right,
Yeah.
reversed. So it was actually to the left of Saturn on the star chart, to
Yeah.
the right of Saturn when I was looking at it through the telescope. So I
Yeah.
thought I thought it was kind of amusing, but also maybe worth mentioning, because I don't know if we've ever actually mentioned that on the podcast, that
Yeah.
depending on the telescope you're using, the view is not what's the right way to put it?
Correctly oriented. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. That happens to me all the time. Yeah. And some people, they've even gone and bought like big prism diagonals to give them a correctly oriented view. But I tried that and I found it so, boy, that was more confusing actually.
Yeah.
And
On one of
would,
my old Dobsonians, I had a RACI finder, so right angle correct image finder.
yeah.
So it made everything the way your eye would see it. And then to go from that to the eyepiece was like, I got used to it, but it was like almost dizzying
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, it's really strange because we get so used to the like moving the kind of opposite way. Like it just, after decades, it just becomes second nature.
Yeah.
And I've even read some stuff where I haven't read it. It's just I studied it in school with the human perception that I've studied. And, the eye can actually reverse the images with the brain to be correctly oriented. And I've even seen this sometimes. So you can actually experience this from time to time as well. This can
Hmm.
happen. So when you go to the correctly oriented view and you think, oh, this is going to be super easy now, and it's not. It's because your brain and eye have compensated for it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's not what it's expecting. So
yeah.
cool.
Well, yeah, that was my week of observing. As you mentioned, we're both off this week, so our weather forecast looks pretty darn good. I think you and I will be able to get out and hopefully take in some darker skies outside of the city.
Yeah, and I got a chance to use the new Skywatcher AZ-GTI last
Oh,
night,
right. Yeah, yeah.
and this was one of the more interesting astronomical experiences I've had. So the conditions yesterday afternoon were not looking amazing. It was actually looking kind of like it was going to be another washout. The night before, I'd been emailing you at like 4 a.m. kind of humorous products to purchase, like hammocks in tents, and you actually thought you might be able to use such a thing. And I thought it'd be great that if I had all the money in the world, I would buy a few of these and create a hammock bunk bed. But you thought that might even be practical.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just kind of ribbing you a bit, but yeah, it was just terrible conditions, and I hardly even worth mentioning that sort of late Friday, early Saturday, I did see the pairing of Venus and the Moon, but it was through such thick cloud that, um, boy, it was. I didn't even go outside. I just looked at it through the window, sat down, thought I'd check back in 10 minutes to see if maybe it had cleared off a little, and when I checked back 10 minutes later, it was completely you couldn't even see the moon or Venus at all whatsoever, even through the clouds. So, but yesterday or last night wasn't really supposed to be much different, but it ended up being very different. Once the sun went down, it just totally cleared off, and it was really good. But I didn't really have that much of a plan. I kind of had wished that we had maybe made plans to go out somewhere. But what I ended up doing was setting up the AZ GTI, which I got just over a week ago, and or about a week. I think I got it on Friday before 2 days ago. I'm getting confused because I stayed up all night. Um, and uh, and so this is an Altaz mount, but it's got the motors in it and has go-to capability, but primarily I really wanted it for tracking the planets so that I can put my refractor on one of the planets and just let it track. So I read the manual, which just says download the software. That's all it says. And I was like, man, this is not enough detail for me because I should note that I'm not necessarily a fan of these go-to mounts at all whatsoever. And in the past, like you and I have tried setting them up, and they can be very frustrating.
Yes.
Um, but this one, I took it out, put it on my own tripod, and that's one of the cool things with the AZ-GTI is that it has just a standard tripod thread. It's not some sort of weird custom thread or a thread that only works with um, like certain tripods that maybe just Skywatch makes. No, it works with any photographic tripod. And you can buy many photographic tripod heads, and it's super adaptable. So I put it on my old Manfrotto tripod and downloaded the software and hit a line and said manually center Jupiter, whatever star I chose. And so I did that. And I tried to do the alignment, and it didn't seem to be working. So I went inside and I was reading. It was like, well, this is really for the go-to, and really, I just wanted it to track. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to just try to get it to track. So I went out. Are you still there? Can you hear me? Because
Yep, yep, yep.
my connection's saying it's unstable for whatever reason. And then I went out again. I thought I'll just kind of put it on something, see if I tried it. I wasn't really sure, and then thought, you know what? I think it's working. I just think it's tracking on Jupiter. I didn't really, as far as I know, really have to do anything. So I thought, well, I'll just like set my timer and put a higher power eyepiece in, because in 5 minutes it should definitely be out of the field of view. And I went back in 5 or 6 minutes, and it was still, it was just about in the center.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it worked just exactly as I wanted it to, right out of the box, without me really hardly having to do anything. So that was pretty exciting. I tried to get the go-to to work, but I think you have to do like a north alignment and a leveling and some other things. And
Yeah.
thought, okay, well, like that would be great, but really, I just want to point it at Jupiter or Saturn or Mars or Venus and just get it to track.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what I did last night. Now, there's there's a couple, there's I guess three things that are a bit of a caveat with this mount. So it's kind of really strange. I guess it's the added cost of everything. And I think that they know, these I think these telescope companies, they know what they're doing. They know how to sell the stuff, right? And what they're doing is they're selling more or less affordable. I don't want to say entry level. I think this is sort of like intermediate level equipment, maybe. Anyway,
Yeah,
and
I'd agree with that.
and they're trying to hit these certain price points, but because of that there are some limitations. So limitation, the first is that any go-to mount is going to require some significant battery power and or a power cable or a power pack or whatever. And so this doesn't come with any of that. So you can go and buy a set of batteries. Now, on the Skywatcher website, it indicated that there was a power cable that you can get for, I think, 50 or $60. You can buy one online on Amazon or whatever for about half the cost. And I'm like, little bit like concerned about doing that because I don't want to fry this like $500 mount because I decided to save $20 on the power cable, right?
Hmm.
So I thought, I'll order the original part. So we did that in June, still don't have it. And so that's why I know. So that, and everything is, delayed with all this COVID business. And the reason why things are delayed is like things that are important to ship, like food and medical supplies and stuff that people really need, and not power cables for Chris's telescope, take the priority. And I'm fine with that, but it's just like an added kind of thing. And no matter when you get it, you're going to have to kind of go through this. Even in the best of times, it's going to be a long turnaround because it's treated like some sort of weird custom part that's not readily available,
Hmm.
even in the best of times.
I,
So,
I, I think I have a solution for you, my friend.
oh, really?
Yes. Because do you need a power supply as well, like a portable battery?
Yeah, I would take one. Yeah. What do you
So,
have?
well, I don't have it, but that
Oh,
website of the that astronomy business that's kind of liquidating all of their inventory because they're
oh
going to
yeah.
close the business. They have a Celestron Power Tank Lithium, which is exactly what I have, and I use that to power my GM9
Okay.
mount. It's a fantastic battery, and
Okay.
I'm quite sure that a cable comes with that. And like that power cable, it's all generic, like it's all standard across all of these things. So
Okay. All right.
and
I will.
it's an outstanding price. So I'll send you a link
Yeah.
offline
Send
here.
me send me the link. Yeah. You've yeah, you cost me more money, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, I like spending
Um,
your money.
I do need to get something, and I do want to get the power cable anyway, because at some point in the future, if I do have a more permanent location that happens to have power, I just want to be able to plug it in and just have like pure 100% clean power without worry about battery charging and whatever. So what I did, and this is something that I found out working in the grain business. I worked for an Internet of Things company, so IoT. People can Google that and try to figure it out. I worked at a company for over 2 years that was IoT, and still not sure exactly what it is. And I was working on the technical side of it. It's sort of like the remote. Everything has a computer in it. World that we're slowly entering into. But one of the challenges in that world is powering remote devices out in the farmers' fields. And the first thing that you learn in the IoT business is that there's only one battery that works really well for double A's, and they really don't cost that much more than other batteries. In fact, they're sort of like medium priced, and that's the Energizer lithium ion AA battery. It's silver with blue writing on it, and it
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely the best AA battery. Sounds like you already knew this.
Well, yeah, yeah, I've used those in when we used to use the green laser pointers. I
Oh
used
yeah.
those exact batteries, and When it comes to using batteries to power your mounts and things, um, I see some people using like those. You can buy those power banks that charge cell phones, and they have
Yeah.
USB ports on them, and people use them to power their mounts.
Oh, really?
Those can be really dangerous. Like they
Oh.
have lithium batteries, but lithium, if it gets any moisture in there, it can become like a real dangerous thing when you go to charge it.
Hmm.
And what's nice about the Celestron battery is that like it's made to be outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're outdoors powering a mount, it's going to get humid at some point. Like the dew
Yeah.
gets in there. So when the reason I have that is because I don't have power in my observatory, and I was researching all kinds of alternative power options, and I was going to get one of those
You didn't
lithium
go with
power
like
banks.
giant crystals or pyramid structures, or
Yeah,
no?
yeah, really.
Oh, not
But
that kind of alternative power.
no, no, different electrical power. But anyway, yeah. So when it comes to
Yeah.
the powering a mount, it's good to stick with like a brand name or something
Yeah.
related to astronomy, because you
Yeah.
don't want the thing to blow up or start on fire.
Right. Well, if anybody's looking for double A's and they want the ones that last the most and that are so they are the only batteries that are rated down to minus 40.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
lithium energizer double A's. They like we would put them in devices and put them in a field, and some of them would last 2 years.
Oh wow.
So I'm kind of curious to see how long them. So I didn't feel too bad. So I bought them. I think they were $16 shipped to my door. And you can't buy them everywhere. In fact, you couldn't buy them on Amazon when I last checked. But when I checked this past week, they were there. So I bought a set of 8. They ran $16. I think I said shipped to my door. Maybe less a few cents or plus a few cents or something. Um, so that's not too bad. But some people say that the double A's, you only get 6 hours out of them. And just in the testing of the mount and the observing that I did last night, I did 2 hours in the evening. And I decided not to use that mount in the morning. That I want to wait until I got some of the other stuff I have coming in order to do some more testing with it. So it's kind of back on the shelf again. Because one of the things it says in the manual is that you're not really supposed to slew it in the azimuth. And it's a little bit confusing because it will say to manually point it at Jupiter. So if I say, all right, I want to point it at Jupiter, and it will say, it will do this little dance, like it will kind of slew to a random part in the sky, and then it will say, okay, now point it at Jupiter. So I don't know what it's doing, but it's got something that it's doing. And then I point it at Jupiter and Saturn or whatever, and it seems to track perfectly almost. And so I'm super happy with that. But I kind of want to be able to slew it around the sky a little bit better. So there's a hack that I found online, and it's not that expensive. But again, it's like I kind of wish they had properly kitted out the mount with something like this. Is you can put what's called a PB70 base on it, and this is just an azimuth pan base with a big knob that you can use in the winter, and you back that off, and you can do all the panning around in azimuth you want without engaging
Oh,
the gears and that are inside the device. Because probably at I was doing this at like 20 degrees Celsius. It's like a perfect evening. It's pretty still. I put my lightest telescope on it, and yeah, so I kind of had to move it a little bit in the azimuth. But I don't know how else you would do it. Like I was using the hand paddle a bit on the cell phone because you download the software. But man, so this panning in the azimuth is a bit of a problem, I think. But the solution to that is $55 American plus some shipping and that. So that's going to be a week coming from PB Photo down in or P&H Photo down in I think it's New York or somewhere. So they're going to ship that up. Who knows how long it will actually take to get here?
mhm.
And then so that's the azimuth issue. Easily solved. Just got to buy a part. So it's like another $75 Canadian. Then the other thing is I thought, well, I should be able to download that software onto my Chromebook and use that because that will take Android apps. And every Android app I've ever used on the Chromebook works perfectly or pretty good. shouldn't say perfectly, it's like 90%. Well, the 10% of the app from Skywatcher that didn't work was the loading part, and it would not load the app. So I was a little bit disappointed in that because I thought it would be really great and that I might use the go-to and just like, because I could put the laptop, or it's a Chromebook, it's kind of like a combination laptop tablet, on my kitchen table and just tell it to go to Jupiter, and then go out and look at Jupiter and come in. And, usually I do some other stuff or get some other eyepieces, have all my eyepieces inside, and then go back out. And then I could tell it to go to Saturn. I thought that would be really slick. So that didn't work. So I was a little bit disappointed in that portion. But like I said, primarily I'm not looking for the go-to functionality. But the hand controller on my phone anyway, like I have an older iPhone, because I only go with like the free ones that you can get. So whatever the third or fourth oldest model is, those are the ones that I always have for like 5 or 6 years. So I don't know whether it's like how old my phone is. I know my phone does need an update, or it might have done the update last night, but it did need an update. But the buttons did not work very well at all on my iPhone. I hear lots of people using tablets and setting a tablet up on a pedestal next to it. To me, that is not like how I like to roll. And like trying to hold the phone and futz with the buttons while looking at the planet, not fun.
Well, especially as we get into the fall and some colder temperatures, it's just not a good solution.
So you can buy, and again, this is one of those things where it's like a custom order from Skywatcher, and there's nobody in Canada apparently that sells it. There's nobody in the States. Apparently you can order direct from Skywatcher USA, and this just seems, and it's like a phone call and they send it to you, and then there's like this custom cable that you have to get, and it's impossible to figure out if they're going to send the cable with it or not. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And then there's a company in England that sells it, and First Light Optics, which has a great reputation. I've never ordered from them, but I've been close a few times. But it was going to be like pretty much $260 to get it. I have no idea how long it's going to take something from England to arrive. And there is an Orion version that's about $40 cheaper. And I was like, well, all the Orion gear like that is made by the same company. The controller's the same. The version's the same. It looks exactly the same, except it says Orion instead of Skywatcher on it. And I was like, and it's just coming from Orion telescope and binoculars. So that's going to be a lot easier to deal with if for some reason it doesn't work or whatever. And they sell tons of those. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go with that one. So I ordered that as well.
Oh, cool.
So that's coming. So, very rapidly, this $500 mount, is now an $800 mount, pretty much exactly.
Wow. That grew quickly.
It did. I kind of expected that, and there's still at least one modification to do to it, at least. And the really neat thing about these is that you can do a lot of modifications to them. And it did exactly what I wanted it to do out of the box. So I wouldn't spend extra money on a device or anything that didn't do what I wanted to do. What I wanted it to do right from the beginning, as I've said, you can go back early episodes, because I don't really like to spend money that much and tend to be tighter with the dollar. And some people who like to go to that auction site more frequently than I do. Giving you a hard time. I wish I really wanted to buy something this week, so that's another story. But I got that out and it worked, so I don't mind putting a little bit of extra money into it to make sure that I can do exactly what I want to do with it, which is just to be able to track the planets, and as well, like I'm outfitting it so that I can even use it in manual mode, which it doesn't necessarily do that well, or not really recommended to do out of the box. So it's going to be pretty good. But I did look up. Oh, and the other part is a new jaw for dovetails, and ADM makes aftermarket jaws for it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the jaw was actually pretty good, so I haven't gone to that yet. But if I'm putting my 5-inch on it, I think it'll take the 5-inch no problem. I want a heavier jaw. Like, in fact, there's no way I'm going to put my 5-inch on there. I think the 100 will be okay. But I'm not putting my 5-inch on that with the little jaw that Skywatcher puts on. So that'll be another $100 or so. So it's really going to be like $1,000 mount. So I went online. I'm like, okay, well, like, what could I have gotten for $1,000 that will take a dozen pounds? And there's almost nothing really, unless you go used. And for under $1,000, you're looking at other mounts that are heavier, that have more complicated things going on, and that some of them won't work manually at all, and no way to modify them to work manually. So there might be some things out there somewhere you can buy something used, but it would take more time and effort to try to figure that out. And I really like to work in LDAS. That's my preferred mode of operating. So I like the fact that I could take this down to the grasslands and set it up and track on a planet, and then I could switch off the electronics and just use it as an LDAS mount. And
Right.
and that's really probably how I'll observe with it. Like, if I'm hunting stuff, I'll just use it as LDAS, and then when I want to track a planet, I'll engage the drives and track it. To me, that seems rather perfect. And to be honest, I might be able to get away just with using the AA batteries for a season, because if I only do an hour or so of planetary observing a night, when we're out at those sites, then I might get the better part of a season out of a set of batteries. And then if I'm able to use an LDAS anyway and the batteries die, well, I'll just use an LDAS, which I prefer to do for 99% of my observing anyway. So
Yeah, exactly.
it should be
Quite
should
versatile.
be fine.
Yeah.
Very versatile mount. And then you can even go online if you Google like Skywatcher AZ-GTI, and you can see like people have done all kinds of crazy mods to them and turn them into equatorial mounts, or put the big jaws from ADM on them and then hung off a counterweight, and some people they've even put, like, now one guy, I don't know, he said it was fine and he pushed it just to see what it would do, but he put a 9.25-inch Celestron Schmidt Cassegrain on it and just tried it. He said it was jittery, but mostly because of the tripod.
Well, that's quite a load.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
All right. I've probably talked enough, but this is like our longest podcast ever. But
Yep.
Anyway, one of them has to be the longest.
Exactly. It was a good conversation.
All right. Good stuff, Shane.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris, and thanks everybody for listening.
Yeah. Thanks for staying with us this long.
Yeah.